And if you got your own crystal ball, bring that as well, I guess.
Maybe if you have a crystal ball, let us know, because then maybe we'll ask you questions.
We might need to look into that too, exactly.
All right, well, I think we are going to get started. You ready, Ian?
Let's do it.
Like almost everybody's been logged in here. So welcome everybody to Tools for Humanity. This is a live streamed conversation where I am hosting and featuring different wellness experts. Wellness, there's lots of different names that I could call the people that have been on this series, but wellness experts is kind of a nice, well-rounded word to sum it up, I think. To basically, I'm featuring these wellness experts to share a little insight, to give us some inspiration, maybe some perspective, and some tools also to help us just navigate this time, this kind of unknown territory that we're all moving through right now on the planet at a kind of a large collective scale. And so there's been several interviews already. So if this is the first time you're attending one and it resonates with you, you can go to my YouTube channel, which is, you can just search Amy Patee, and all of the previous interviews, conversations are posted there. And there's been just some really, all of them, lots of insight and just some amazing wisdom coming through. So I encourage you to go check those out if you're interested to see who these other speakers were, and to learn, kind of just grab some tools and put them into your toolbox for you to use while you're navigating these times. And also, if you didn't hear me already, you are muted. We can't see you. This is being recorded. You're going to receive an email tomorrow with a link if you want to watch the replay, or if you want to share it with your loved ones or people who you think might benefit from it. You'll have access to that tomorrow. And if I don't know you personally, my name is Amy Patee, and I'm a yoga teacher and an intuitive guide, and I also have a full-time job, which is fairly new to me. But so lots going on in my life personally. But this is something that I really enjoy doing on the side, doing interviews or podcasts and just highlighting some of the amazing people out there in the world that are bringing really phenomenal services to the planet. So without further ado, this is Ian Williams, today's guest, and I'm going to have Ian just share a little bit about himself, who he is, what he does, and we'll dive in starting there.
Yeah.
You want to take it away, Ian?
Thank you, Amy. And before we dive in, I just want to reiterate what Amy said. There's been a few panelists on before me, and they're all wonderful human beings. And I've been watching them, and there's wonderful tools. So be sure to check them out if you haven't. They're all very legitimate in their own right. And I've been privileged enough to experience some of their own work myself in person. So definitely check them out if you have the opportunity. I feel really honored to be here. Amy selected a handful of people, and somehow I made the cut. And so I'm looking forward to just providing as much value as we can for all of you over the next hour. My name's Ian Williams. I am an educator. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a writer. I'm a philosopher. I'm kind of a jack of all trades. I think that's why Amy and I get along so well. And so the conversation tonight might roam all back and forth. But if you've got an opportunity to, make connections with what we're talking about to your own life, then that's what we're here to do. So hopefully you've got your thinking cap on, your reflecting cap on, and yeah, I'm looking forward to getting started.
Awesome. Can you just share a little bit more? So you kind of, you generally said that you're an entrepreneur, you're a philosopher, you're a writer. Can you just elaborate a little bit more, like what you're drawing from in terms of like your background, what maybe spiritual traditions or practices have influenced who you are today, and what kind of entrepreneur are you? Speak a little bit more about your specialty.
For sure. From a personal standpoint, one of the things that I like to do is I'm an educator, and I like to teach through sharing personal story. So, just a quick synopsis is that I was an addict for 12 years, about 4.5 years in recovery right now. And so, although I may look young, I have a lot of life experience, good and bad, both ends of the spectrum. And so with that has come a lot of deep work internally, a lot of self-reflection. So I started on the spiritual path. I've had a knack or an inkling for for seeking. So, my energy arts practices started with yoga, trickled into meditation, trickled into Qigong, which is really kind of where I found my home in terms of an energy practice. So I'm a Qigong practitioner. And, all sorts of other things along the way, martial arts and connecting and group work. And so that's kind of where I come from personally in terms of my background. I'm a deep thinker. That's why I use the term philosopher. It might be a little grandiose for some, but, if you read my journals, you might agree. And I've been an educator for the last 10 years. That's kind of what I've done professionally, to pay the bills, as they say. But I have entrepreneurial tendencies and I have an entrepreneurial spirit. And again, that's another reason why Amy and I get along so well. So there's kind of three different domains that entrepreneurial work falls into. One of them is one-to-one work. And so I work with individuals one-to-one, and I call them clarity sessions, but it's really just like spiritual direction, coaching, self-reflection. I've got a brain that loves to synthesize and organize. And so, one of the themes that I've noticed in my relationships along the way has been, people have got all these ideas, but they have trouble fitting them together. And my brain seems to do that naturally. And so I love to do that one-on-one with people. And we'll talk more about that work later on. And, if you want to learn more about it, you can always visit my website too. That's a great place to learn more about me. I also work with organizations, corporations, and organizational psychology and business planning, sustainable practices, and integrating mindfulness in the workplace. Mindfulness has been such a huge, plus and benefit in my life. And so I feel like it can only help those who are, out in the workforce. It certainly helped me in the workforce. And then I'm also an environmentalist. And so I'm trying to find as many ways as possible to regreen the earth. The phrase that I use is EcoReverence, spiritual ecology. And those are themes that kind of weave their way through all of my entrepreneurial ideas. And, again, we can dive deeper into this, but basically the way that I look at it is obviously being human beings, we're dependent upon the natural world. And over the last, few decades or century, depending on when you want to start your time clock, we have really found a way to have business and the natural world go in opposite directions and not necessarily be mutually beneficial. And so one of the things that I'm trying to do is just make sure that corporations out there are keeping the natural world in mind. And then also with my own work, as a real estate investor, that's one of the ways that I invest and exercise my entrepreneurial spirit. It's really focused on environmental restoration and also affordable housing. These two things they're essential for community well-being and also planetary well-being. And so a lot of my work is geared towards those two things as well. So we'll talk more about that later on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. And one of the words that really stood out for me is eco-reverence, right? Yep. Hashtag eco-reverence.
Yeah, I think
I love that.
I think it's just, if I use harsh language, one of the phrases that you'll learn in business, right, is like the triple bottom line. So care of, right, profits, people, and the planet. And you can find this in the field of permaculture as well: care of people, care of earth, care of the future. And I really do believe that it should be a triple bottom line, and regardless of where one falls on the political spectrum, I think it's safe to say that we have some organizations and corporations out there that are putting profit over people and ultimately just leaving the planet out of the equation entirely. And so the thing that kind of boggles my mind is that I don't understand how profit can be so important without the planet. If the planet doesn't sustain human life, then what do all these businesses mean? And that's one thing that's been really fascinating. Like, I find myself daydreaming every day, multiple times a day, about this COVID-19 pandemic, in the sense of we've spent the last, again, several decades, if not centuries, really trying to work to learn how to harness the power of the earth. And some wonderful things have come of it. And there's no doubt that those wonderful things provide luxuries to many people on the planet. And at the same time, I think Mother Earth is speaking back, right? I think it's pretty clear that she's saying, like, hey, wake up, take a listen, feel this out. this virus is, microscopic, and yet it's brought the entire human race to its knees in a matter of a couple weeks. And so I think just that's one thing I find myself thinking a lot about these days is being reminded about the power of the earth. And so that's why I put those two words together, eco-reverence, right? Because I think it needs to go beyond respect. I really do think it needs to be a reverie for the natural world. And it's something that I'm passionate about, and I try and include in all my work.
Yeah, I love that. That's really beautiful. And you said all of that really eloquently. So thank you for going a little deeper into that and all of what you do. So one of the questions that I've been diving in with people is around the pandemic, which this is a great segue because you've already mentioned it, but just for yourself personally, and you've spoken a little bit to it, but for yourself personally in regards to the pandemic and what's happening right now, how has your attention changed in terms of what you're focusing on? Where do you find yourself being of service, or just what's happening internally for yourself? I think that it's been really interesting to hear different people speak to this because it's all like everybody's having similar experiences in their own way. We're all, as Julie had mentioned, we're on this roller coaster. And so it's nice to hear personal stories because it kind of normalizes, I think, what we're all experiencing or having like little bouts of. So I want to just share a little bit about what your experience has been like and
focusing for sure. I absolutely can. And the thing that I really want to start off with, Amy, is that I first just want to give my condolences and my sympathies to everyone and every family that's been affected by this. I mean, there are truly people out there dying and losing loved ones. And that is something that I think, you can't put a price tag on, so to speak. And so I've been finding myself really deep in thought about that often. Obviously, 99% of the people alive today haven't experienced the pandemic. They don't know what it's like to live through a pandemic. And so I just find myself sending out a lot of good vibes to as many people as possible, and just kind of spreading a blanket over, geographically in my mind, I guess, kind of casting a net, because the reach of this is really impossible, I think, for the human brain to start wrapping its head around yet, because we're still in the midst of it. And so the first thing I just want to say is, my sympathies and condolences to everybody who's been directly impacted by this, especially if it means that you've lost a loved one. And in terms of where I am personally, I kind of want to maybe go to the opposite end of the spectrum and say I feel really healthy. And I think a large part of that is because I'm an introvert, and I'm a deep introvert, and the opportunity to kind of just go recluse, right? And have the social norms kind of immediately shift. I find myself kind of in a really healthy space and really enjoying my time. And I have mixed feelings about that too, right? Because I know there are plenty of people out there who are not enjoying their time, but the way that I kind of think about it in my head is I'm trying to be the counterbalance, right? And hold some positivity and light in a space that could be filled with a lot of darkness right now from a lot of perspectives. And, the first week that it kind of hit here in Minnesota, I jokingly said, but also I was half serious. Like, I felt like I just went to bed. I went to sleep like somebody hit me over the head with a 2x4. And I was just knocked out. And it took me a couple of days to realize that my nervous system was totally resetting itself. And I didn't recognize the adrenal fatigue that I was just living with in day-to-day life. Yeah. And so once I came out of that first week, I kind of just got my bearings and recognized, okay, I'm now really going to need to implement my own self-structure in my life in terms of my schedule and task orientation and work objectives and, kind of across the spectrum, relationship maintenance, all these things. I got my bearings around me, and I feel like it's been a really wonderful time for me personally. And I'm always trying to hold the microcosm of myself within the context of the macro, right? In the sense that there's a lot of push going around, or at least I've seen it a couple times, on social media and whatnot, about I can't wait for things to go back to normal. And that phrase has kind of been grinding my gears a little bit, because I think that our normal is what got us here. And I think that the earth is asking us to consider a new normal. And so with those things in mind, I find myself going back and forth and back and forth. And I've also been thinking a lot about how this is kind of revealing the fragility of a lot of things in life, from macro systems, government, healthcare, education, agriculture.
Mhm.
You know, a lot of those systems, like the veil is kind of being peeled back, and we're starting to see just how well they actually function. And at the same time, this is really also testing the individual and our own individual resiliency skill sets. And so that's why I just absolutely love the way that you've kind of branded this whole series, Amy, in the sense of tools for humanity. I think the humanity piece is critical, and at the same time, there are tangible tools that we can do to cultivate and bring
Mhm.
that back. Um, and I've also been, as a Gemini, as a triple Gemini, um, I find myself really going back and forth, right? In the sense of sometimes I'm feeling really healthy, and overall I'm feeling really healthy, and sometimes I'm just like down in the pits. And that reminds me that there's different trauma responses, and they're all okay. Quite literally, no matter where you are on the spectrum, however you're choosing to take care of yourself right now is good. It's healthy, and think about that. I myself tend to be someone who responds to stress and trauma by over functioning. Um, and so, my wife posted an article about exhaustion and how it's an okay response during this time. And somebody replied and said, oh, so it's okay that I haven't, gotten six pack abs and written a full book yet. And I laughed when I read that because uh, those are quite literally two things that I'm focusing on right now. Not necessarily the six pack abs, but like my physical health,
Yeah.
right? So I don't mean to sound too vain with that, but I'm also diving into book writing. I've had thoughts noodling around, and this has been something that's bugging me for a lot of years. And I'm looking at this time, recognizing that I've got this opportunity to leverage this time, which quite often I don't have in my busy, hectic day-to-day life, which everyone can relate to. So it just reminds me that there's a whole spectrum of how people are responding, and I'm trying to stay balanced with that response. And if, like I said, as a deep thinker and philosopher, I find myself thinking a lot about my deep work, my deep internal work, and that's really the thing that I'm most excited about this from an individualistic standpoint, is that this has given me an opportunity to kind of sit down and clean the slate and just think about, what do I want my life to look like? Like, what is my core purpose here on this planet? And how is this activating things inside me that want to come out, that want to be expressed? And so, I'll share a little story about how this kind of all set off for me. As an entrepreneur, one of the things that I started this year is I was taking a weekend a month, and I was going up north just by myself. I'd pack all my food and all my water, and I'd go up north so that I had zero distractions, so that I could just work on my business. And so I got up north on a Thursday night and went to bed, and I woke up and I had a relaxed morning, and I was reading a book called The One Thing, which is written by Gary Keller, and it's a phenomenal book. Truly has changed my life. So if you're looking for a good read, check it out. And there's a focusing question in the book. It's, what's the one thing I could do right now such that by doing it, everything else will become easier or unnecessary? And they call it the focusing question because it forces you to narrow in on just one thing.
Mhm.
And there's different domains that they say to implement this kind of mindset in your life. And one of them is family and key relationships. So I asked myself the question, what's the one thing I could do right now to let my wife know that I love her? And the answer was like immediate and bold, and it was, drive home and tell her. And I kind of like, it was like hitting a speed bump, because it's like, I just got up here. I haven't even been up here 24 hours. And I have this thought that I need to go home. And like, I literally need to drive 3 hours home and tell my wife that I love her just face to face. And so I wrestled it with her for a few minutes, and I was like, well, maybe I'll just drive into town and I'll call her. And it, like, my body's visceral response was very much like, no, get in the car and drive home. So I packed up all my stuff, and I got in my car and I drove home. And that weekend, so I got home on a Friday night, late Friday night, told my wife I loved her. And then that weekend is really when COVID blew up here in the state. Things kind of started shutting down. And I mean, anybody who's experienced this, it's really just like everything's been switched at the drop of a hat, And so I was glad I was home. It was very purposeful that I was home. But personally, I've been focusing on my health and well-being. I love taking care of my body, but I really don't enjoy going to the gym. So if there's other people out there who want to take care of their bodies, but the gym doesn't sound right for you, there's many other ways to stay fit. And one of the ways that I've been trying to do that is with a daily sadhana. So I'm really trying to ground into my morning practice. I'm really trying to focus on eating healthy foods. And because I know that it would be very easy to just we've been watching plenty of Netflix, but it'd be very easy for me. I know my habits as an addict or a former addict to binge watch Netflix and eat a lot of sugary foods and then be totally worthless and just unmotivated and feel like crap. So I've been really trying to, hold tight and double down on my meditation, my sitting meditation practice. I love moving meditation. I love yoga. I love Qigong. I love Tai Chi. I love martial arts. But I've really been trying to focus on my sitting practice. And again, just paying attention to the signs, where my life is leading me. And then from a professional standpoint, I mean, I've had a lot of ideas come through in the last couple of weeks. I feel like I'm in a really creative space. So I've been doing a lot of business development and just trying to move my business from being efficient to being effective, right? Being purposeful in my work. And a couple of those things that I've developed or that have come out of that have been self-reflection guides. And so, you can find these on my website if they sound interesting, but one of them I'm calling a personal and spiritual maturation workbook. So that one's actually pretty short. It's only about 6 or 7 pages, some written text and some self-reflection exercises. But, if I can jump back to the story about coming home from up north and my one thing, I was really kind of struggling that weekend with making that decision about coming home because I was saying to myself, this is my work weekend. And at the time, for the next 2 months, my wife and I were booked every single weekend. And so I was like, if I don't stay up here this weekend, I lose my work weekend. And then it was kind of like, no, I can still have my work weekend if I go home. I just need to set boundaries. I don't know if anybody else has been needing to set boundaries lately. And so I got home and I sat down for a few hours and I just kind of started journaling and channeling. And what came out was it's a 32-page guide that I've been working on for the last couple of weeks, and I'm calling it Awaken Your Life's Core Purpose. And it's just kind of a step-by-step process. And I don't want to necessarily say it's step-by-step in a linear sense, but there's a lot of steps in there that are just meant to help people wrap their heads around what they want out of life and why they're here on this planet. Obviously, listening to me speak, you probably recognize that, there's a lot of spirituality in the way that I process the world. I'm a firm believer that we're all here for a reason and we all have, the soul has purpose. And so I put together this guidebook to try and help other people find their soul purpose. So those are a few things that I've been working on. Maybe that was more than you bargained for.
I was going to say, I'm starting to get the flavor of the overachiever. What did you say? You're an overachiever or you do more in a time of stress?
Yeah.
But a lot of what you're doing is centered around, just keeping yourself healthy, doing a lot of self-reflection. There is, it sounds like for you, a little bit more space and time. So you've filled out that space in ways that are supporting you and moving you forward. And I think a lot of people, probably people on this call, have had a little bit of extra space too, unless you're on the front lines working. But
right.
And we're all kind of edging into this new space and wondering what we want to fill it with. So
Right.
it sounds like you've given us a lot of good examples of things to fill it with, and these workbooks too that we could access and download and work through too, and get maybe a little more intimate experience with what your processing is through these workbooks. So we'll have links to all of that stuff on the email that you get tomorrow and on the video and stuff. So cool. You'll have a chance to check those out. So thank you for sharing all of that. That's beautiful and a lot.
You can edit all that out later.
What's that?
You can edit all that out later.
No, no. No, it was more just, it was like you've filled out the space, with a lot, or you gave us a lot of ideas about just all the different ways to like fill out that space, I think. And but what's beautiful about it is that it's filled out it feels like you filled out the space, which is good for you and for your personality type because you know who you are. You filled out the space, and it's focused around you understanding like what you want to do, who you are, why are you here, but you clearly are bringing it back to an external kind of collective, earth-based spiritual focus as well. So it's taking care of you to take care of the bigger picture, the bigger planet. So I love hearing all of that. So what tool do you think would be really beneficial for us to experience, to maybe practice, to help us kind of keep moving through this unknown time?
Yeah, I think, I mean, to go back to what you said, the internal work that I'm doing and trying to relate it back to the external, I really feel like, when I say words like, I think the earth is asking us to wake up. That's really what I mean, is I feel like this is a calling, especially for individuals who, like you said, have the luxury or the privilege to be on this call, right? To be able to take time to do this. And I know that there are plenty of people out there on the front lines and probably even some people on this call. Mm-hmm. But if you've got the time and the space to think, why not do so? Mm-hmm. Why not go deep? And so I'm not big on, a lot of my practices I hold really close in terms of like, my energy art practices and my meditation. So I'm not huge on guided imagery or things like that, but I do have a little guided imagery that I'd like to walk people through tonight, and just a short meditation. And then I'm going to leave people with 3 questions and just encourage them to spend some time with those questions. And if those things feel like, they're exciting and they're encouraging and people want to go deeper, then I'd encourage them to reach out, or go online and find the workbooks that are available for download. So should we take a minute and just do a quick practice?
Yeah, I would love that. And I just want to share with you one comment that came in from Mary. This is her comment. I love that you said there are different trauma responses and they're all okay. Many of us have a trauma response and then criticize ourselves for it. Thank you for modeling acceptance.
Yeah. Well, thanks for the comment, Mary. You're a large part of why I'm accepting my trauma response.
Mary's amazing. And she has been interviewed a few interviews back, so be sure to go check her out. But
yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So this practice, let's give us a little experience.
So it's just going to be a quick meditation, and it's going to start with a quick body scan, and then it'll kind of infuse with a little guided imagery. And I would just encourage you to make the practice your own, right? One thing that I hear a lot in the healing community is that, my wife says it all the time, and I love the way she puts it. She says, I don't feel like I'm the healer. I just feel like I'm facilitating a process of healing. And I think that that's a fantastic, way to remove the ego and just allow the self to come through. And so, if you feel encouraged to go somewhere else with this, then I would encourage you to do that. But, for those people that would like to be walked through something, then I'll just do that. So let's just take a moment and find a seat or stand if that's more comfortable for you. Find any comfortable position. And I would encourage you to put your feet to the floor or find a comfortable sitting meditation, anything that's going to allow you to feel grounded, right? So maybe put the palms of the hands down on the knees and thighs, or maybe turn them up towards the sky, and just take a few moments and connect with your breath. Maybe it's deep and slow. Maybe it's short and shallow. And know that however you're breathing, taking the time to connect with your breath is what's most important. And just feel your body take a few breaths. And then try and check in with your heartbeat. Send your awareness into that space in your chest cavity where your heart lies, and see if you can actually feel your heart beating. And take an opportunity to give that organ some thanks, because it works really hard every day in a lot of different ways. And then with your mind's eye, I'm just going to ask you to paint a little picture. I'm going to ask you to envision a house. It's kind of out in a rural area, and I'm asking you to sit on the back porch, maybe in a rocking chair, an Adirondack. And next to you, maybe there's a little cup of tea. And you're looking at a sunset, restorative environment. Maybe there's a garden in the backyard, some wooded areas. And I want you to reach for that cup of tea if you haven't already. And what we're going to do is something I call emptying the cup. So I want you to use that vessel, the container of the cup itself. And I want you to just flush all the things that are in your body that you don't want. Just put them in the cup. And don't think too hard about it. Allow it to be relaxed. And then I want you to take that cup and I want you to pour it out over the grass, return it to the earth, because she's the one that's going to be able to recycle it the best. And then maybe set that cup down on the saucer and stand up and hop off that porch and go walk into your garden. Maybe it's an annual garden, maybe it's a flower garden, maybe it's a perennial garden. And just enter that space and take some time to observe what's around you. The soil or the grass or the wood chips underneath your feet. The plants that are growing in their many different life cycles and stages. And then I want you to look closely at the ground. One thing that all gardens have is weeds. And a beautiful friend of mine doesn't like that term. He refers to them as undesirables. So I just want you to see those undesirables in the garden. And I want you to turn and I want you to look in the corner of your garden where you've got your compost pile. And recognize that that compost pile is an integral part of your garden. It is not where weeds or undesirables or aspects of self go to die. It is where they go to be revived, to find new life. And I just want you to hold this metaphor of a garden in your mind moving forward. This garden is similar to your life or your lifescape. And you are your own gardener. You choose what to plant, what seeds to sow, and how to tend and take care of them. And as you look out over the landscape, maybe it's a rolling prairie, or maybe it's the native oak savannas that covered this continent many years ago, recognize that you are a part of that landscape. You are a steward of the earth. Any reciprocal relationship involves giving and taking. She gives you life, and you have the opportunity to do the same. And then connect back with your breath and come back into the body. Maybe rubbing the fingers together, washing the hands, maybe rubbing the face, massaging the ears. And then you can slowly open the eyes and bring the mind back to this Tools for Humanity session. So like I said, Amy, I'm not big on guided imagery. but I am big on metaphors. And, people, if they've been listening or paying any attention, then they know that I'm thinking a lot about the earth at this time. And I just feel like it's time for us to enter back into relationship, not just with the earth, but also with ourselves, right? This body is an ecosystem, and we are our own gardener. We take care of that space. We take care of this temple or this garden. So this is something that's been helpful for me over the last few weeks and years. It's something that I do, and when I feel like this reality is a little bit too intense, then I give myself permission to go to somewhere that's a little bit more serene and peaceful. Yeah. Yeah. And from a gardening standpoint, there's a lot of knowledge out there that would say that the weeds or the undesirables in your garden, those plants are actually showing up because that's what the earth needs. The earth needs the properties of those plants. And I tend to think the same way about the soul, right? We all have aspects of ourselves that we don't necessarily like. And, the emptying the cup visual isn't necessarily like disposing of them, but it's opening up the vessel to bring new life in, is how I think about it. And so thinking about what aspects of yourself do you want to modify and shift? And if there are those aspects, how? What are your tools to do that? Right? For sure. Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing your experience, Amy.
Can you hear me? It's actually Keith.
Yes. Hi, Keith, formerly known as Kristen.
So Chris is here too. When I was going through the visualization, one of the things that occurred to me is when I got into the garden and we started talking about the compost, I desperately wanted my tea back so that I could pour that on the compost as well and recycle the undesirables of me into the new life of the garden. I felt robbed that I couldn't grab my tea back.
I think that's a wonderful analogy. And I say you can take your cup of tea with you wherever you want to. And not ironic, and I didn't at all intend for this connection, but compost tea is a wonderful thing to fertilize your garden. So I think that's a good analogy, Keith. Thanks for sharing. Yeah. So the clarity sessions are part of my one-on-one work. And I call them clarity sessions just because that's what they're designed to do, is bring clarity. And so, I mentioned briefly earlier on that my brain just has a tendency to synthesize and organize. And I've heard many times over from many people in my life that not everybody's brain works that way. And so it's a skill that I love to share. It's an opportunity for us to sit down, typically one-on-one, can be in person or it can be, via phone or virtual meeting like this. And we just work a pretty standard sequence. And so what that sequence is we identify where you are right now, and then we identify where you want to go. We work together to brainstorm solutions on how you can get there, and then we draft a plan. One of the things that I think a lot about is, right, how can we know how to get where we're going if we don't know where we want to go, right? It's like shooting into the dark without a target to aim at. And so that's why I like to identify where we are and then identify where you want to go, and then just kind of reverse engineer a solution. And my role in those clarity sessions is to help you organize, to help you synthesize, to help you brainstorm, and then help you come up with a plan that you can enact on your own life, right? Just like the healer isn't doing the healing, they're facilitating the process. That's how I see my role in the clarity sessions. It's not necessarily what do I want for your life, it's what do you want for your life and how can you get it? And if I can be, a support system or, a signpost along the way as you walk your path on your journey, then I'm happy to do that. So yeah, hope that answers Julie's questions as well. Yeah, one of the phrases that I like to share with people, and they'll find it on my website too if they choose to go there and do any reading, is designing the internal landscape. Right? Oftentimes when we hear the word landscape, we're thinking of external landscape, the physical environment around us. But there's a social landscape, right? The fabric of our society socially has a landscape, and internally, the self has a landscape. And just like you are your own gardener, you have the opportunity to design whatever landscape you want. It is a matter of choice, right? And I think it's a much deeper philosophical conversation that we don't necessarily have time for about, right? Manifesting destiny. And if you believe that your soul has a singular purpose or a core purpose, then great. How do we uncover that together? And if you're like, no, I don't necessarily buy that stuff, then it's a matter of, okay, well, what do you want? Like, what do you want your life to look like? And great, how do we manifest that? To me, it doesn't really matter what the belief system is. It just matters like tangible tools, right? We're just trying to add more tools to our tool belt, for sure. Yeah, yeah, those are wonderful questions. Thank you both. And it's also right a little bit of divine intervention that they come back to back because they go hand in hand. So to address Mary's question about what is qigong and how can that support the body, so qigong is an energy practice, and it's similar to tai chi or yoga. Qigong is a Taoist practice, and so its focus is to build the vital energy of the body. And vital energy is typically translated as qi. But if one goes deeper into traditional Chinese medicine or Taoist philosophy, there's actually, they call them the three treasures: qi, jing, and shen. So qi can be thought of as energy, and jing is your essence, and then shen is your spirit. And so qigong is a mind-body practice that allows one to build or fortify their three treasures. And so if you're looking at it from a pure physical health and wellness, it's got a myriad of benefits, right? Digestion, improved sleep, increased body awareness, lower stress levels. I mean, there's all sorts of things that it can help on a physiological or even neurological level. And then if you want to look at it from a spiritual perspective, it's really it's a tool, it's a practice for spiritual awakening, depending on your approach or if those things go hand in hand. But what to get away from all the theory and the philosophy, it's a practice which has allowed me body awareness. And this is where I say those questions go hand in hand. If we can use the analogy of a body as an iceberg, right? And we're all kind of familiar with this concept that only 10% of the iceberg is above water and the rest of the mass is below the water. That's kind of how I think about the conscious and the subconscious mind, or the brain and the body. What we're aware of consciously is really just the surface of that iceberg. And all the mass that exists underneath it is either the subconscious mind and drives, or the body itself. And so to address Christine's question about listening to the body feedback or hearing the message and following through, I would say that it's a matter of the context of that decision of coming back from up north was really just how I could show up in that moment with my whole self. My body was telling me, go home, do this in person. And it's a challenging practice to have the mind say, okay, right? Because the ego exists in the conscious mind in the sense of thinking that it knows what's best or knows what's right. And oftentimes, these are very powerful machines that we have in between our ears. And at the same time, there's a warehouse of information. There's so much more information in the body. And if we can build a trusting relationship with ourselves, where we can move freely across the bridge which connects body and mind, that, to me, that walking across the bridge is the spiritual path. It's just waking up to what's already inside. And so, it doesn't mean that, I would say that coming back from up north was really like a highlight moment for me, right? In the sense of when I got home, and then the next couple of days is the confirmation that I needed to know I made the right decision in that moment, right? I was here with my wife and my family when everything hit. But this this body feedback is something that we can all access, and Qigong is a simple tool to help us do that. And meditation or yoga or Qigong or Tai Chi or martial arts, there's a million and one practices out there that are meant to build body awareness. And it's like there's many roads and they're all leading or guiding us to the same direction. And that's to be in relationship with ourselves and with one another and with the natural world. And so I hope that answers your question, Christine. And it also, brings me back again to the tools for humanity piece, right? The subtext of Amy's series here, Tools for Humanity, tools to bring us out of crisis and into connection with the self, others, and the earth. Those words have literally been on my website for the last several years. And so, it's a real honor to be able to come in. And I think that the body is like, you can think about it like the receiver. It's always giving information. It's picking up way more information from your surrounding environment than your conscious brain is. And so if you can train your conscious mind to tune into the body, then that's really where you can show up as a more, holistic, healthy human being. Yeah. That's a really good question, Mike. And I think without being a cop out of an answer, the first thing I would say is it depends. What I would say is it depends on your self-awareness, right? You might be the type of person who needs to or wants to or will be more motivated if they know where they're going, right? And so for you, if designing your garden or your internal landscape, where if you get really excited about the visioning portion, then I would probably encourage you to do that first, and then look at your life and how things are and see what doesn't match, because that'll give you the insight that you need to figure out, right, what undesirables to remove or to transform, right, to compost. Or if you're in the state that I was in at the end of my 12 years of addiction, I couldn't think about what life I wanted. I could only know that I didn't want the life I had. And so what that really meant was sitting down and taking a really deep, hard, dirty look at all the things in my life that I didn't want. And I mean, it truly was like days of journaling. And there's a whole other story that goes with that. But it was just identifying all the things that I don't want. And then it was looking at that list and saying, okay, well, if I don't want these things, what can I replace it with? Or how can I transform these things into healthier habits or, right, healthier manifestations in my life? And so, again, I don't mean for this to be a cop out of an answer, Mike, but I would say it depends on the type of being that you are. It depends on the type of processor that you are. And chances are good that you're probably somewhere in the middle. And it's a little bit of both and. The Awaken Your Life's Core Purpose guide that I put together on my website, I said it's a step-by-step, but it's really it's really just like a roadmap. It's more like a GPS system that's filled with an array of different exercises to do this type of self-reflection. Some of them are more visioning based, some of them are more reflection based, and then all of them encourage you to figure out how you can design tangible tools to get you from where you are to where you want to be. But it's a really good question, right? And I think that it depends on your self-knowing and where you are in the moment. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I hope that answers your question. Yeah, and repurpose them, right? I mean, there's so many weeds that show up in the garden that to the layperson, they don't know, like, hey, these are edible. Hey, these are actually medicinal. Hey, these weeds in your garden, these undesirables are actually here to teach you. They're challenges which represent opportunities. And so that's why I go with the emptying the cup visualization, because again, I just want to show up as an open vessel that's able to kind of receive and be open, because this is from my own experience. The moment that I make up my mind and think, this is exactly where I'm going, this is exactly how I'm going to get there, and then I start on that journey, life is like, it just turns into a pinball machine. It's like, oh, you thought that? Just kidding, go over here. And you can't avoid that stuff, right? But the bodily feedback that your body gives you is an excellent way to, like, I kind of think about it like bowling with the bumper rails up. It'll keep you in the lane. You might hit the rails every once in a while, but if it keeps you on the path and moving in the right direction, then that's really the goal, right? Is to knock down as many pins as possible. Yeah. And we've got a magnificent opportunity. It's the best opportunity in my lifetime to sit with that. I mean, I know that there's a lot of noise. There's a ton of noise. And at the same time, right, the duality is that it's also rather quiet. And we have an opportunity to go inward because, all those social obligations or expectations or working remotely from home, so you're not spending the time commuting. These are all extra minutes that are compounding that we can use to turn inward. And I really do believe that internal work is what we all need to come out of this healthier and more resilient. Yeah, if you've got a pen and a pad or if you've got a phone, just to jot them down. I spent some time reflecting, which I do a lot of, about what would be some easy, accessible questions that just kind of start to tease the surface a little bit. And so those 3 questions are, the first one, what opportunities is life presenting you right now? It's very easy to look at the current circumstances and just feel like everything's been taken away. And in many regards, that's true. And at the same time, what opportunities are present in your life right now? So that's the first question. The second question is, how can or how are you enhancing your health and well-being across all domains? We've all probably heard that phrase of it's hard to give to others if your cup is not full. And part of filling up your cup is health and well-being. So how can or how are you enhancing your health and your well-being at this time? And then the third question is a little bit more out front. When this time passes, who do you want to be and how do you want to show up in the world? Because this time will pass. We will get through this in the sense of like the entire species is not going to go down. We're being dramatically affected right now, but this event circumstantially is not going to end the human race. How are you as an individual on the other side of this going to show up in the world? Who do you want to be? And if you can identify some of those things, then again, that kind of goes back to Mike's question about, well, how do I get there? So those are 3 questions. What opportunities does life present? How are you taking care of your health and well-being? And who do you want to be and how do you want to show up when this time passes? So the phrase that I end my Awaken Your Life's Core Purpose guide is the same phrase that I started with. And that is, whether you discover, or whether you design your life's core purpose, what matters most is that you pursue it. And that's what I'd like to leave people with.